Picture this. The Spartan admiral Eurybiades raises his cane to strike the Athenian general Themistocles across the face. They're standing on the deck of a warship, surrounded by the most powerful naval commanders in Greece, and they are seconds away from a fistfight. Themistocles doesn't flinch. He doesn't draw a weapon. He looks the Spartan dead in the eye and says 5 words that will echo for 25 centuries. "Strike me, but hear me." Eurybiades lowers the cane. Themistocles begins to speak, and what comes out of his mouth is the most audacious military plan in the ancient world. Lure the largest navy ever assembled into a strait so narrow that their numbers become a death sentence, then crush them while a god-king watches from a golden throne on the shore. Every commander in that room thinks he's insane. Within 48 hours, they'll call him a genius. This is the Battle of Salamis, the story of how one gambler with a silver tongue tricked the most powerful man on earth into destroying his own fleet. Before diving into these forgotten stories of strategy and survival, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we're exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. That confrontation between Themistocles and Eurybiades wasn't a disagreement between equals. It was a hostage negotiation between a man with a plan and a coalition on the verge of total collapse. By September of 480 BC, Greece was finished. Not in trouble, finished. King Xerxes of Persia had crossed into Europe with somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 soldiers and a fleet of roughly 600 warships crewed by the finest Phoenician, Egyptian, and Ionian sailors in the Mediterranean. The 300 Spartans had been slaughtered at Thermopylae. The Greek fleet had taken heavy losses fighting a draw at Artemisium, and Athens, the cultural capital of the Greek world, was burning. Xerxes' soldiers had stormed the Acropolis, butchered the handful of defenders who'd stayed barricaded behind a wooden palisade, and set the temples on fire. The smoke rising from the Parthenon's predecessor could be seen from the island of Salamis, where the Athenian refugees were huddled with their children, watching their civilization turn to ash across the water. Now here is the first misconception that needs to die. Xerxes was not some cartoon villain leading a mindless horde. He was the ruler of the most sophisticated empire the world had ever known, commanding professional armies from over 40 nations. His Phoenician captains were the best sailors alive. His engineers had built a pontoon bridge across the Hellespont that was a marvel of logistics. He had cut a canal through the peninsula of Mount Athos to avoid the storms that had wrecked his father's fleet a decade earlier. This was not arrogance. It was competence on a civilizational scale. And Themistocles, he was a half-breed nobody. His mother was a concubine, possibly Carian, possibly Thracian, which meant he wouldn't even have qualified as an Athenian citizen before 508 BC. He had no aristocratic pedigree, no inherited wealth, no military dynasty. What he had was a tongue sharper than any sword, and a mind that could see 3 moves ahead. 3 years before the invasion, when a massive vein of silver was struck at the Laurium mines, the Athenians wanted to divide the windfall among the citizens, essentially a tax refund. Themistocles stood up in the assembly and talked them out of the money. He convinced them to spend every last drachma building 200 warships. He didn't even mention Persia. He told them the ships were for the war against the island of Aegina. It was a lie designed to save the world, and it worked. Those 200 triremes were now the only thing standing between Western civilization and permanent subjugation. But Themistocles couldn't use them if the rest of the Greek fleet sailed away. And that is exactly what the Peloponnesians wanted to do. The Spartan-led alliance was arguing for retreat. Pull the fleet back to the Isthmus of Corinth, they said. Defend the Peloponnese. Forget Athens, it's already gone. The Corinthian captain Adimantus told Themistocles to his face that a man without a city had no right to speak at the council of war. This wasn't a military debate. It was a funeral, and Themistocles was the only man in the room trying to stop the burial. What Themistocles did next was either the most brilliant or the most reckless move in military history, depending on whether you think he was a genius or a lunatic. The evidence suggests he was both. After failing to convince the allied commanders to stay and fight at Salamis, Themistocles played his trump card. He called over his household slave, a man named Sisinus, who served as the tutor to Themistocles' children. He gave Sisinus a small boat and a message, and sent him rowing through the darkness toward the Persian fleet. The message was simple. Themistocles was secretly on the Persian side. The Greek alliance was falling apart. If Xerxes moved his ships into the straits of Salamis that night, he would catch the Greeks before they could escape, and Themistocles would defect mid-battle. Every word of it was a lie, and Xerxes believed every syllable. This wasn't a retreat, this was a trap, and the bait was Themistocles himself. The Persian fleet moved at midnight. Hundreds of warships rowed silently through the dark water, fanning out to block both exits of the Salamis Strait. An Egyptian squadron sealed the western channel. The Phoenician and Ionian main fleet massed at the eastern entrance. By dawn, the Greek fleet was completely surrounded. When the Greek commanders woke up to discover they were encircled, panic erupted. Shouting, accusations. Some captains were already hoisting their sails to flee. It was at this moment that Aristides, the man Themistocles had once gotten banished from Athens through ostracism, rowed across from the island of Aegina with the news. Aristides is one of those characters history should remember more. He was Themistocles' political rival, nicknamed the Just, because he was incorruptible, which in Athenian politics was basically a disability. Themistocles had orchestrated his exile. And now Aristides was standing on Themistocles' deck, putting aside years of personal hatred because something bigger than their feud was at stake. He told Themistocles the strait was sealed. There was no escape. They would have to fight whether they wanted to or not. Themistocles smiled. He told Aristides the truth. He had orchestrated the encirclement. The Persians had done exactly what he wanted. Now the Greeks had no choice but to fight in the one place where the numbers wouldn't matter. Aristides stared at him for a long moment. Then, without a word of complaint about the years of exile or the political backstabbing, he went straight to the allied commanders and confirmed the news. The strait was sealed. Running was no longer an option. The only way home was through the Persian fleet. The comedy of the situation is almost unbearable. The Greek coalition had spent days arguing about whether to fight or flee. Themistocles couldn't convince them with logic. He couldn't convince them with speeches. So he went behind their backs, tricked the enemy into surrounding them, and then let the enemy do the convincing for him. He had turned cowardice into courage by removing the option of retreat. He hadn't won the argument. He had made the argument irrelevant. It was the most spectacularly underhanded act of leadership in ancient history, and it was about to save everything. The morning of the battle, the strait between Salamis and the mainland was barely a mile wide at its narrowest point. The water was calm, but a morning wind was building, an offshore breeze that Themistocles, who knew these waters intimately, had been counting on. Roughly 370 Greek triremes were arranged in a crescent formation near the Salamis shore. Each trireme was about 120 feet long, the length of a Boeing 737, powered by 170 oarsmen arranged in 3 stacked tiers. The ships were heavy, the crews were green. Most of the Athenian rowers had never been in a naval battle before. But the Greek ships had 2 critical advantages. First, they were built sturdier than their Persian counterparts, with reinforced hulls designed to take punishment. Second, each ship carried a complement of hoplite marines, fully armored soldiers, the same men who'd made the phalanx famous on land. A Greek marine weighed over 200 pounds with his bronze cuirass, greaves, helmet, shield, and spear. 20 of them on a single trireme added 2 tons of fighting weight. Across the strait, the Persian armada began its approach. The Phoenician squadrons led on the right wing, closest to the mainland. These were the finest sailors in the empire, manning ships with sleek hulls designed for speed and the deep plows, a maneuver where a ship would row through a gap in the enemy line and ram them from behind. Behind the Phoenicians came the Ionians and Carians on the left, and behind everyone, in row after row stretching back to the open sea, came the rest: Egyptians, Cilicians, Cypriots, a vast forest of masts and oars. On a golden throne placed on the slopes of Mount Aigaleo overlooking the strait, Xerxes himself sat watching. Scribes flanked him, ready to record which captains fought bravely and which showed cowardice. Every commander in the Persian fleet knew the king's eyes were on them. Every captain was desperate to impress. This wasn't a tactical advantage, it was a fatal flaw, and Themistocles knew it. A Greek war chant rose from the fleet. Aeschylus, the playwright who was actually there pulling an oar, described the sound. A loud cheer like a song of triumph first rang out from the Greeks, and from the island crags, an echo returned an answering cry. The Persians heard the echo and realized with a shock that the Greeks were not fleeing, they were singing. Then the Greek fleet surged forward. The collision was not a graceful ballet of maneuver, it was a demolition derby. A Greek trireme at ramming speed, roughly 7 knots, drove its bronze-sheathed ram into the hull of a target with the force of a battering ram hitting a castle gate. The ram was designed not to pierce clean through, which would trap the attacking ship, but to crack the hull planking below the waterline and shear off the enemy's oar bank. When a trireme lost its oars on one side, it spun helplessly, unable to maneuver, a sitting target for the next ship in line. The Phoenicians struck first on their right wing, meeting the Athenians head-on. These were experienced crews and they fought savagely. They attempted the Deekplaus, driving their slim hulls into the gaps between Greek ships, trying to get behind the line. But the strait was too narrow. There was no room to maneuver. The elegant tactic that worked beautifully in open water became suicide in a channel where turning was impossible. The Greek ships, heavier and more stable in the choppy water kicked up by the morning wind, slammed their reinforced prows into the Phoenician hulls. When ships locked together, rams tangled in shattered wood, oars snapping like dry kindling, the hoplite marines leaped aboard. And this is where the technological gap became a death sentence. A Persian marine was typically lighter armed, quilted linen armor, a short sword, perhaps a wicker shield. A Greek hoplite was an armored bulldozer, 70 pounds of bronze, a 9-foot spear, and a 3-foot aspis shield that could cave in a man's chest. When a hoplite hit a Persian deck, he didn't fence. He crashed through the defenders like a wrecking ball through plywood. Archers on the decks of the larger warships rained arrows down on Greek borders, targeting the gaps in the hoplite armor, the unprotected throat above the breastplate, the inner thigh below the shield rim, the exposed sword arm when a man raised his weapon. Persian marines grabbed at the Greek spears, some managing to snap the shafts, forcing hand-to-hand combat where their shorter swords and daggers could find the soft spots between the bronze plates. But courage cannot defeat geometry. The more Persian ships that pushed into the strait, the worse the situation became. The rear ranks, their captains frantic to prove their valor under Xerxes' watchful eye, pressed forward into the fight. The ships ahead of them had nowhere to go. They were being pushed into the Greek rams by their own reinforcements. And then, a death shattered the Persian command structure. Ariabignes, the admiral of the Phoenician squadron and Xerxes' own brother, drove his flagship directly at the Athenian line. He stood at the prow, showering the Greek ships with javelins and arrows. An Athenian trireme rammed his vessel. In the chaos of the boarding action, Ariabignes leaped onto the Greek ship, sword drawn. He went down under a storm of spear thrusts, his body collapsing on the enemy deck. The death of the admiral decapitated the Phoenician command. Without coordination, the best squadron in the Persian fleet devolved into a mass of individual ships, each fighting alone, pushing into each other, snapping their own oars against their own hulls. In the center of the strait, a wedge of Greek ships punched clean through the Persian formation, splitting the fleet in two. Now the Persians were fighting on 3 sides. Ships in the rear were still rowing forward. Ships in the front were trying to back water. Ships in the middle were being crushed between the two. This wasn't a battle anymore. It was a trash compactor. And then came the most infamous moment of the entire engagement. Queen Artemisia of Halicarnassus, commander of 5 warships in the Persian fleet, found herself boxed in. Behind her, the battle was a screaming tangle of shattered wood and drowning men. In front of her, the Athenian captain Amenius of Pallene was bearing down on her ship at ramming speed. There was a personal bounty of 10,000 drachmas on Artemisia's head. The Athenians found it intolerable that a woman had dared to make war against Athens. Artemisia looked at Amenius closing in. She looked at the Persian allied ship beside her, a vessel commanded by King Themistocles of Kalindos, and she made a decision that belongs in a movie. She rammed the allied ship, sank it, killed Themistocles and every man aboard. The Athenian captain, seeing Artemisia attack what he assumed was a Persian vessel, concluded she must be a Greek ally or a defector. He broke off the pursuit. Meanwhile, on his golden throne, high above the carnage, Xerxes saw Artemisia ram a ship. His attendants told him she had sunk an enemy vessel. Xerxes, watching his entire fleet drown, reportedly said the line that Herodotus preserved for eternity: "My men have become women, and my women men." He was praising her for sinking his own ship. Not a single man from the Kalindian vessel survived to tell the truth. This wasn't heroism. It was the greatest act of friendly fire in recorded history, and Artemisia walked away without a scratch. By afternoon, the strait was choked with wreckage. Broken hulls rolled in the swell. Oars floated in rafts of splintered wood, and the sea was full of men, hundreds of Persians thrashing in the water, unable to swim. Herodotus notes this detail with devastating simplicity. The Greeks who lost their ships swam to Salamis. The Persians who lost their ships drowned because most of them had never learned to swim. Meanwhile, Aristides, the same man who'd brought the news of the encirclement, led a detachment of Athenian hoplites across to the tiny islet of Psytalia, where Xerxes had stationed about 400 soldiers to pick off shipwrecked Greeks. Aristides killed every last one of them. The final tally was devastating. The Greeks lost about 40 ships. The Persians lost roughly 300, with most of their experienced Phoenician and Egyptian crews destroyed. The fleet that had been the largest in Mediterranean history limped back to the harbor at Phalerum, broken, bleeding, and leaderless. From his throne on the mountain, Xerxes had watched the whole thing. He had seen his brother die. He had seen his finest ships torn apart. He had watched his empire's naval supremacy vanish in the space of a single afternoon. He ordered the throne removed. He didn't want to look at the water anymore. In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. Xerxes, the king of kings, the man who had whipped the Hellespont for daring to destroy his bridge, did something no one expected. He ran. Not immediately. First, he called a private meeting with Artemisia, the woman who had sunk his own ship and been praised for it. She was the only commander he trusted now. He asked her a simple question: should he stay and fight, or should he go home? Artemisia told him to leave. She told him that the land army under General Mardonius was still intact, and Mardonius could finish the conquest while the king returned safely to Persia. It was the same advice she had given before Salamis: don't risk the fleet unnecessarily. This time Xerxes listened. He left Mardonius with 300,000 men and departed Greece, never to return. It was the beginning of the end. The following summer, the Greek coalition destroyed Mardonius's army at Plataea and burned the remaining Persian ships at Mycale. But the cruelest irony of Salamis isn't what happened to the Persians. It's what happened to the man who saved Greece. Themistocles returned to Athens a hero. He was feted, honored, even acclaimed by the Spartans, who gave him a crown of olive, a gesture so rare it bordered on the miraculous. For a brief, shining moment, he was the most famous man in the Greek world. But Themistocles had a gift for making enemies. He rebuilt the walls of Athens against Spartan objections, fortified the port of Piraeus, and made Athens into a naval superpower. Then he built a personal shrine to the goddess Artemis near his own house with the inscription "Of Good Counsel," a blatant monument to his own genius. The poet Timochrion of Rhodes wrote mocking drinking songs about his arrogance. His rivals sharpened their knives. In 472 or 471 BC, barely a decade after saving civilization, Themistocles was ostracized. The citizens of Athens scratched his name onto pottery shards and voted him into exile. The same democracy he had saved decided it was tired of being reminded who saved it. He went to Argos. The Spartans, seeing their chance, accused him of conspiring with the Persians, the very people he had destroyed. Athens converted his exile into a death sentence. Suddenly, the hero of Salamis was a fugitive. And here is the moment that captures the entire tragedy. Themistocles, hounded from city to city, hunted by the very civilization he had preserved, eventually ended up at the court of the Persian king. Not Xerxes, who had died. His son, Artaxerxes. The man who engineered the greatest defeat in Persian history walked into the Persian court and asked for asylum. And Artaxerxes, who reportedly said, "I have the man who has done me the most harm," gave it to him. He made Themistocles the governor of Magnesia, a wealthy Greek city in Asia Minor. The savior of Greece spent his final years governing a Persian province, drinking Persian wine, speaking Persian to his servants, earning his bread from the very empire he had broken. He died around 460 BC. Some say illness, some say poison. The most poetic account claims he drank bull's blood, a famous ancient method of suicide, because Artaxerxes asked him to help plan an invasion of Greece, and Themistocles refused to betray his homeland a second time. Whether that last story is true or not, the symbolism is inescapable. The same people he saved threw him out. The same people he defeated took him in. We remember Thermopylae because it's simple. 300 men hold a pass. They die. They're heroes. The end. Salamis is the opposite. The hero is a liar, a manipulator, and a schemer. He tricks his own allies, deceives the enemy, and saves the world through an act of betrayal so audacious that both sides thought he was working for the other. The victory doesn't come from courage. It comes from geometry, wind patterns, and a household slave rowing through the dark with a message made of lies. We don't make movies about Salamis because the hero isn't photogenic. He doesn't die gloriously in the final act. He wins, gets exiled for his trouble, and ends up working for the enemy. That's not a Hollywood ending. That's the actual price of genius in a democracy that feared its own saviors. But Salamis is the battle that mattered. Without it, there is no Plataea. Without Plataea, there is no Golden Age. Without the Golden Age, there is no Socrates, no Plato, no Aristotle, no democracy, no theater, no Western philosophy. All of it, every idea that shapes the modern world, was floating in the balance that September morning, in a strait barely a mile wide, decided by a man who was too clever for his own good and too honest to save himself. History doesn't reward the people who save it. It rewards the people who die trying, and that is why you know the name Leonidas and not the name Themistocles. Until now. If you made it this far, you're a true history enthusiast. Please verify your subscription now. It really helps the channel keep these forgotten stories alive. Check out this next video on the screen about the Battle of Plataea, where we explore what happened when the Persian army Xerxes left behind finally met the Spartans in open combat. I'll see you there.